Thank you and welcome. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome members and officers to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting and welcome anyone watching online via our YouTube channel. Before the meeting gets going, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer to explain how proceedings will work and to undertake a roll call of those attending online.
Thank you, Chair. Can I please check that the following officers attending remotely can hear us and we can hear them? Rumi Bose. No, I'll come back to that later. Phil Doggett.
Yes, present.
Thank you. And Councillor Tamsin Thomas.
Yep, loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other officers attending remotely that I haven't called out? Doesn't look like it, so we'll move on to rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. The normal procedure rules in respect to debate and times to speak will apply. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? I'm seeing no questions, so I will now hand back to the chair.
Thank you. I have received apologies for absence from councillors Elizabeth Dennis and Dominic Griffiths. I don't think we have any other apologies. Great. So we move to the minutes of the meeting on the 6th of January. So I have had an amendment to the minutes from Councillor David Chalmers, who would like added. Would you like to read? Well, shall I?
Sorry, did you? Just calling up. Yeah. No, I just said I felt there ought to be an amendment to the effect of concerns were raised at the police, Herts Police, not participating in pride events that would damage the much needed trust between them and the LGBT community and impact the reporting of LGBT hate crimes.
Thank you. So would we add that as a bullet to the end of the discussion about that? So on your sheets, it would be page I guess it would go under the bullets on page 8. Is that reasonable? Thank you. So I think we need to vote to accept that amendment first. So can I? Do we need? So may I have a proposer, David, and who would like to second that amendment? Thank you, Councillor Binney. That'd be great. Okay, so can we move to the vote then, please, to accept that amendment?
That motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you. So can we then move to take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of January with the amendment? I'd like to propose that. Can I have a seconder?
Yep, I have a second.
Thank you, Councillor Clayton. And to the vote.
That motion is also carried, Chair.
Many thanks. Item number 3, notification of other business. We have not had any other business notified. So I move to the Chair's announcements. As you will be aware, in accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as the Council's ModGov site, alongside the documents from this meeting. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. And for the purposes of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of the item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business on the agenda and wherever possible, leave at an appropriate point in the proceedings. And finally, members are reminded that we have adopted a scrutiny charter, which outlines how we conduct scrutiny at North Herts Council, including the need for independence, initiative and integrity. It's important that all members are mindful of this and how they approach the items on the agenda tonight and at future meetings. And full details on the adopted charter can be found on the Council's intranet page for members. Item 5 is public participation, and we have no public participation at this meeting. Item 6, there are no urgent or general exception items. Item 7, nothing has been called in. And item 8, no questions from members have been received, which brings us to item 9, which is the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge follow-up. And I call upon Councillor Bryant to present. Thank you.
Thank you. The Council undertook a corporate peer challenge between 4th and 7th of November 2024, where we were visited by a peer team supported by the local government association. The peer team produced a feedback report, which was reported to Cabinet on the 14th of January 2025. Subsequently, an action plan was developed to respond to the recommendations and was approved by Cabinet on the 23rd of March 2025, with an update on the progress reported to Cabinet on the 23rd of September 2025. The peer team undertook a one-day follow-up visit on the 15th of December 2025 and have issued a follow-up report, which is attached as Appendix A. I assume you've read Appendix A, which has an introduction, a summary of the approach that they took, a review of the progress we've made in the last year, and final thoughts and steps for the future, which I'm sure you'll find interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Claydon.
I'm happy to kick us off. I noticed there was some comment on council officer relationships in the report, recognising that none of us are dispassionate on this topic. Did the LGA have any recommendations for exploring, improving, or I guess altering that relationship in the future? Is it something that the council has any sort of plans for? Just interested to know, because it seemed like one area where there was some, potentially something to think about.
Clarify, you're talking about councillor officer relationships or councillor relationships?
Councillor officer relationships. So page 33 of the papers. I can read the section out if it's helpful.
Okay. That's just making sure that I got the right one. There was comment. There was concern which was raised by officers, particularly when officers felt that they had not been given sufficient notice of a question to be asked by councillors. And I think that if we accept the adage of nothing should be a surprise, that in fact nothing we ever ask an officer in a meeting should be a surprise. I think at the moment that the officers actually feel like they're actually they're revising for an oral examination, everything that possibly might come up. And we could be a lot kinder by talking to officers in advance and by giving indications of questions in advance.
Thank you. Yes, and just to follow up on what Councillor Bryant said, you'll of course remember at full council last week you adopted various new protocols that have been produced nationally, which ultimately go back to how members and officers interact, and particularly the role of the statutory officers and what their function is in helping that. So I think we're putting things in place, but actually what it boils down to is just being kind to each other and talking to each other and treating each other like humans. And I think generally we do that pretty well. I think it's something that's easy to take for granted, and particularly when the politics starts becoming more sensitive, then I think that's where relationships can fray on both sides. And I think, if we just keep that ethos of, we're all here, we're all on the same side, we're all trying our best for the community. And if we keep that in mind, I think we should be fine going forward.
Councillor Ward.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just reading the, I don't know if it's an appendix, but the section at the back of the report that talks about the progress on the 10 recommendations. So that's page is about 45 onwards. And I know what the report said around the impact of local government reorganisation. The status of those 10 recommendations, if I've topped it up in my head correctly, was something like six green, 3 amber and 1 red. I was just wondering, I'm not sure if you can answer this or others involved in this process, as in the corporate peer challenge process. Is that normal that we would see that kind of level of progress in some areas but not areas, looking at the corporate peer challenge process across different organisations when this is done? Is that a typical sense of how much progress we'd expect to be? Now, I'd be amazed if it was all green, but also I'd be horrified if it was all red. So I was just wondering, sense of perspective, is that the kind of level of progress that we'd expect to see typically?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to field that one. Generally, this is sort of fairly typical. I think it's sort of fair to reflect that organisations are always in different places. So if you had a peer challenge report, the original one that, found 50 things you were doing wrong, then, well, A, you'd probably expect to see a bigger change when the peer team comes back. But B, they might not be able to have that sort of percentage just because the sheer weight of things that they're having to work through. But certainly from the ones I've seen locally, this is pretty standard. And I think one of the things that we're going to have to figure out going forward, and you mentioned local government reorganisation, is at what point do we stop looking back on this peer challenge? Because from the LGA's point of view, this follow-up is the end of the process for them. For us, it's not the end of the process because we're on a journey of continuous improvement, always will be. But we're not going to exist come 1st of April 2028. So at some point, we will draw a line under this and decide, well, actually, we've gone as far as we can on these things because all focus now is on launching these new authorities.
Just to get a quick follow-up, sorry, Chair, if that's all right. Just no, I can understand why you say that, and I would agree with the sentiment. I was just wondering how, given that's the end of this process, how do these things then get followed up in trying to make that decision between what's worth still pursuing in the context of LGR and what's not? Because it's entirely sensible. There's probably some no regrets things to carry on doing in here anyway, but some things that there's just no point. So how does that process actually get followed up?
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Yes, I think this is the beginning of the end. Think of it that way. And this is ultimately Cabinet's decision. Cabinet will follow through and decide at what point we actually focus totally on the end. As it is, you can see we've not got many facets of the plan that we've got to look at, so it's not that hard.
Thank you. Councillor Wright-Mason.
Thank you, Chair. And just to slightly preempt the debate, I think there's some really fantastic stuff in here, and I think everyone should be very pleased with the result. I certainly am reading it. I think it shows a very impressive delivery even without LGR, but obviously with LGR happening even more so. Obviously, one of the recommendations is about prioritization, and I just wondered, in terms of moving forward, are we kind of developing a must deliver before LGR list or mechanism kind of formally, or are we going to kind of wait? Because obviously there's that whole transition year before we know any more details.
Thank you. The short answer is it's going to be a constantly evolving process. The longer answer is we will ultimately make those decisions through the council delivery plan, which of course you scrutinise here from time to time. The budget that will be adopted later this month will obviously set out what going via cabinet, what the administration is hoping to budget for and therefore achieve in the next 12 months. So it will be through those sorts of processes. It's a constant dialogue between executive members and the directors, between the leadership team collectively and cabinet collectively around what is achievable, and just being really clear with each other on, from the political perspective, what are those key things they want to see delivered before 31st of March 28, and from the officer perspective, what capacity constraints are there that will affect our ability to do that. In terms of specifically where some of those decision points fall between now and the May 27 shadow elections to the new unitaries, that is a consideration when we're discussing some of the bigger longer term projects, but it's not a driver, because we shouldn't be making a decision just for the sake of having a decision by a certain point in time. Ultimately, we should still be making the right decision on those projects. And my perhaps naive view is if we're making the right decision for the right reasons and we can afford to do it, there's no reason why a future unitary would look to undo that decision. If we're rushing a decision and not making it, if we're missing things out or not making a fully formed decision, then that's where you've got a risk that a future unitary might look to do something different.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. We've got a council plan, of which we're now in the 3rd year, which we've all agreed on for several years, and nothing new is going to come up. So I think we've just got to use the idea is that nothing's going to be added. We're going to be a year short of our delivery plan, and that's why we have to prioritise. But at the moment, they're going smoothly.
Thank you, Councillor Munster. Oh no, I beg your pardon.
And amended as usual. There's one thing that's going to be added: Royston Learner Pool.
Thank you, Councillor Munster.
Thank you very much, and I'm very, very pleased to hear that. But in terms of when this review took place, we were, of course, in a political stalemate with, following the vote of no confidence in the former leader, and that is acknowledged throughout the report, and of course would have impacted on the recommendations, particularly when we're talking about prioritisation and political prioritisation at that. You've now been in office for, well, coming up to a month in terms of the leader, good and proper. Of course, you were acting for a month before that. When we're speaking about prioritization, has anything jumped out at you, Councillor Bryant, as to what you may or may not have done differently and sort of how you're doing things differently moving forward?
The short answer to that is no, because I worked very closely with Councillor Allen when I was deputy leader, and I sold myself as very much the continuity candidate. That's what I am. But I'm very much behind the council plan, the delivery plan, and I feel that we, as I've said to you before, we've got more in common than that divides us. And what we need to do as a councillor team, all of us, all 51 of us, is to actually work together up to the elections in 2027 and to vesting day to do the best by this authority. And in doing so, we continue going forward. It means that the officers also will continue going forward, and that they must have confidence in us, that in fact that we're not going to use this as some sort of battleground for the elections. It must all be about doing the right thing by our residents.
On that. Thank you very much for that response, Councillor Bryant. And just reading through the report, it mentions, councillors want to leave a legacy. And when I hear the word legacy and I associate it with this administration, I instantly think Churchgate. And it goes further within this report on page 31 to go that serious consideration needs to be given to finding and allocating additional budget and resources. When can we expect to see that actioned with respect to Churchgate? Because I know that we are currently in the feasibility stage, but of course, if we want to try and get this project up and running by the time that LGR comes about, then of course we need to be moving quite quickly.
I was actually surprised to see that sentence in there, and it is the perceptions of the peers. It's not our perception at all. And I don't think we ever mentioned legacies. Obviously, having said that, the nearest we would have to something that could be called a legacy would be Churchgate. But you'll have the opportunity to ask about that at the next presentation, because it's actually on an item on the agenda later on this evening.
Thank you. I have no further questions, so I don't believe. So I think we can move to the recommendations. We have two parts to the recommendations: that the findings of the Corporate Peer Challenge follow-up report be noted, and that the progress against the Corporate Peer Challenge action plan be noted. So before the debate, can I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Clayton. And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor By Mason. So we can move to the debate then. Anything additional that people would like to add? Councillor Ward.
Oh, thank you. Just a question. Obviously, the recommendations here are noting it, given the role of ONS. Is there, where has it been approved at cabinet then, or where was the point of kind of agreeing that we've closed out that process and the recommendations and all the stuff? Was that through that?
It goes to cabinet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And Councillor Mansell.
Just a couple of comments from me, if I may, Chair, because I think with these reports, they either go two ways. They either get sort of filed onto a shelf, never to be seen again, or they actually get actioned. And, to the credit of the administration and to the credit of our senior officer team, it is really reassuring to see the progress which has been made to try and action the points of which have been raised by the LGA. And of course, there is always room for improvement. There is always room for progress. I think that's acknowledged both within the report and through what the Chief Executive has said. It's, of course, crucial that, moving forward, we've finish this stage of the LGA Peer Challenge, but we're looking back into the organisation ourselves. We're identifying those areas of weakness, areas of improvement, and we're constantly focusing on evolving and making sure that we are the most resilient organisation that we can possibly become local government reorganisation, and to make sure that actually, in terms of the day-to-day service that our residents are experiencing on the ground, that LGR doesn't have an adverse impact on that. So I very much look forward to hearing more about that over the coming weeks and months.
And Councillor Clayton.
Thank you. Yes, actually, just want to echo what Councillor Munster said. I think the overall level of progress against these objectives is excellent, considering the fact that I know LGR has been hugely distracting. It's been a huge amount of work for everybody. So I just want to congratulate everyone at the council, officers and councillors, for continuing all this work alongside LGR. So thank you.
Thank you. So if I was going to draw, I have no further questions as yet. So if I was going to sort of draw together those threads, we've noted the need to improve relationships between councillors and officers, and being kind would be positive. I think we can make sure that goes both ways. The need to prioritise carefully in the, with the view to LGR happening, and continuing to reflect on the findings. So is there anything else that we would like to kind of put into the record about the Corporate Peer Challenge before it does get closed down? No? Okay, so those would be our comments. So we have moved the recommendation, so we can move to the vote then, please.
That motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you both very much for attending. So we move to item 10, which is the enterprise portfolio update. Councillor Tamsin Thomas, who's attending remotely, will be presenting. She has asked in advance and been given permission to have 5 minutes to present. So I'll hand over to Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for accommodating my request to Zoom in. I know that we all value ensuring that exec members can present, so I really appreciate the flexibility this time, but I assure everyone my preference is always to be in the room with you if I can be. I'm really pleased to be able to present this report. It is a big one as it covers a quite large portfolio, and we also were minded of the interest in Churchgate, so apologies for the long read, but hopefully it was comprehensive and it gave members a good overview of where we are with the Enterprise Directorate. I'm supported today by Steve Crowley and Rob in the room, and Phil from Estates and Rumi, our Churchgate project manager, are here as well. So thank you to the team for joining for tonight. So I know everyone will have read the report, but I want to share some key headlines from across the portfolio of things that I want to make sure that get noted. The first is obviously Churchgate, our flagship and most significant project, and I'm sure there'll be questions later on that. We've now completed the sort of initiation and startup phase of that project, and there's been a comprehensive programme of viability assessments and market due diligence covering everything from housing to retail demand, the market and shops, parking, the quality of the public realm, including a river, which has its own complexities, and the financial viability. It's an incredibly complex and noteworthy project, and one that the project board are determined to get right and to deliver. And I note Councillor Muntz's comments on the previous item. The team has taken the scheme from acquisition through a public consultation with over 2,000 responses to a set of viable options which are being scrutinised by the project board currently, and the objective remains, as it always has been, a financially viable community-led development. As we move into delivery, a cabinet report on the viability options will be brought forward in spring alongside full council. There are delays to this process, and I come back to the wanting to make sure that the right level of scrutiny is happening and that we're able to make the right decisions. Viability in this context requires balancing the housing delivery, including affordable housing, alongside the right quality of public realm and the market space, taking into account future ownership considerations and the level of developer investment, while understanding which elements of the scheme are going to contribute financially in the long term and which do not. I'm really grateful for the appointment of Rumi to the team, who is strengthening our capacity to navigate these factors as we enter the next phase. We have a key project board meeting coming up on the 27th of February, which I know we're all looking forward to. I also wanted to highlight that the economic development strategy has been brought forward along with its evidence base, which has been approved, and the associated budget coming forward to full council will help resource its implementation. I'm particularly grateful for the very constructive economic development workshop we had that also had participation from Councillors Muntzer and Strong, which I think really underscored the level of opportunity that exists in our district. We just need to do more, I think, to mobilise on that, and the economic development strategy laid the groundwork for that. Turning to the cultural services team, the museum service achieved visitor numbers exceeding 30,000 in the last year and has delivered 6 really strong exhibitions over the past 2 years. The town hall hosted over 668 event bookings, which was an increase on the year before, covering a broad range of cultural and community interests. While the cultural service area remains a subsidised service, inflationary pressures and other pressures have actually been offset by increased income and efficiencies, which is great to see. I'm not going to mention museum storage, as I think I've mentioned that one enough to this committee, but obviously a huge deal for the cultural services team. The estates team manages over £30 million of council assets and generates approximately 1.8 million in net income per year. And the team has been modernising the leasing arrangements and progressed long-standing projects, including the arena in Baldock and the orchard in Jackman's. It supported the museum storage acquisition. They're in the process of bringing forward option papers on Charnwood and Riverside Walk. And there is a strategic portfolio review being undertaken to assess what opportunities there are for asset disposal. Following restructuring, the service also welcomed Michael Clark and the property services team. They oversee 76 premises, manage around 1,400 service requests each year, and a whopping 9,000 compliance checks annually. Alongside maintaining the estate, the team has also brought in new modernisation systems through a new facilities management and compliance tools. They've also delivered major repairs at Thomas Bellamy House, Charnwood House, Baldock Community Centre, St Mary's Church and the Hitchin Fountain, and worked with the Climate Change and Sustainability Project Manager on decarbonisation proposals, as well as the installation of solar PV and EV charging at the offices. Stepping back and taking a more holistic view on finance, the report compares last year's outturn and this year's projected position. Budget projections for 2025-6 show a 1% year-on-year increase, primarily reflecting the Churchgate resourcing, as well as some other line items. The main variances, as well as increased estates income following rent settlements and improved performance at the Churchgate shopping centre. On headcount, the team is currently resourced at 87%, with 4 vacancies expected to be resolved through the economic development process and some catering appointments at Town Hall. On timelines, the director is managing over 50 live projects, with a majority on track. We learned that filling critical estates posts has really accelerated progress on estates, on some of the work in the estates function, and we expect that our the upcoming appointments, if approved in February, will have a similar impact. On risk, the highest risk projects remain Churchgate and the museum collection facility. Both are managed through the council's established risk management and project governance frameworks. So before closing, and at the request of the chair, I'm going to just briefly touch on the project boards. All project boards follow a Prince 2 aligned framework. Larger projects such as Churchgate are governed by a project board of senior officers and members. Churchgate has cross-party support, has Labour and Lib Dem representative. And the board's role is to deliver the business case and refer key decisions beyond its remit to the relevant committees. Using Churchgate as the example, it's currently at the viability stage. And once the board agrees a preferred option, it will come forward to proposal via the existing mechanisms. So this sequence ensures that committees can add value to the project prior to any final decision, with opportunities for member involvement and as projects progress. My recommendation is for the committee to note the report, and I'm hugely thankful to officers. Building a comprehensive report like this across the portfolio really does take a significant amount of work from multiple officers, so I hope that the committee's found it useful, and I know that we all look forward to your questions. I can't see anyone's faces, and I find that really off-putting. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Yeah, I'd like to just ask one question first. Honestly, this is so complex. It's a very comprehensive review, and I'm really very grateful for all the work that's gone into producing it. There's obviously lots of opportunities here, but the report does speak to some capacity concerns. Would you like to expand on how you're prioritising projects, particularly where you may not have as much control as you like over timelines?
Thank you, Claire. So I'm sure Steve will have something to add to this, but I think as a top line exercise, I have sat with officers and worked through which of the projects do we see LGR impacting positively, and which of the projects do we think would be served better by being accelerated. The team is, but LGR, we know it's coming, but so much is still left undecided. We do still need to manage and govern the portfolio as it is, and so we do have a prioritized framework that we're working to in projects, and I think the big ones for me certainly are Churchgate and the economic development strategy, and delivery of the museum service. Those are all projects that I think will serve our residents well once this authority no longer ceases to sort of be in place. There are other projects where we know our residents want them delivered swiftly, which was continuing to progress. Charnwood, which I know could, is an example, which is one which could be progressed on different timelines. I think, but we're still very alive to the fact that that's a project that the public want delivered, and so officers are still working on that delivery now. So I think one of the critical things is that we have got approved vacancies that aren't filled, and so there is a capacity there. Or there is a function there which can help us move forward. So it's really important that we get those HR issues sort of addressed, and the team are working on that as well. Steve, do you have anything you want to add on the sort of prioritisation process we went through?
Thank you, Tamsin. Just the only other thing to add is we have looked at all of the project that we have, and we have already done a prioritization of those projects. So as Tamsin's mentioned, the key ones, they are obviously the ones which we are working on, but then we know there's also other things which need to be undertaken, and we will just continue to reprioritize as need be. Hopefully with in the next few months, we'll have more people in the team specifically on economic development, which will enable us to undertake the work that's required on the economic development strategy. And then we'll be able to look at that work programme and also prioritise that work programme.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a very detailed report, so thank you, Tamsin, and the officers. Just a question. First question on surprise, Churchgate. I'm reading the report. Also, just conscious we're not in part 2, so just bear that in mind. But it's stating in terms of the next steps that there's viability assessment, and then the options around that are going to the project board and up through to cabinet, like you were saying earlier on. That seems to assert that there is a viable scheme, because it is saying that one will be presented. So is that, without leading the witness, is that your current understanding of where we are based on that work?
Based on the current status of the work, yes, Paul.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I've got a different question. Can I carry on? Right, thank you. There's some links in the report to the, I get the correct title of the document, the economic strategy for 25 to 30, which is another excellent document that I was reading. I was just in the back of that strategy document, there is a reference to a plan, I think a five-point or 5-area action plan of things that are going to get done. So I was wondering how, back to our other conversations about lots of actions and lots of plans and priorities and et cetera, what we're 1 year into this strategy, what is that plan? How is it shaping up, and how does it fit into everything else?
Yeah, Steve, I've got comments on that, but do you want to take that in the first order?
Yes, thank you. So you're right, the strategy has been adopted. We've also put forward to leadership who have given its approval, which is set out in the current budget, which will be for next year, which looks at the restructure within the team. And as mentioned just a minute ago, that is where we will be bringing those additional officers for us to then work that work programme and then deliver that work programme. So unfortunately, we have had a bit of slippage, mainly because of, dare I say, a lot of the other key projects that we're trying to deliver on, but that will be a priority once we have the team on board. Tamsin.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, I was just going to say that there are certain line items as well, Councillor Ward, in the SPF funding around the skills agenda that have been actioned as well. and the team now have access to economic development databases, for example, that they didn't have access to before, that facilitate knowing who the businesses are, knowing who the contacts are, and being able to start having those relations. So there has been some movement on that front, and I think the economic development strategy sits well alongside initiatives like Churchgate, which obviously Churchgate creates an economic development opportunity. And what we want to make sure is that that opportunity is realised. We can build a facility, we can put in some great. I've been travelling around different towns throughout the eastern region, looking at schemes of similar size. And one of the things that I'm hyper alive to is, just because you build the building, put the thing in, doesn't mean that the opportunity necessarily gets realised when you're going through transition. And so that's why it's really important that we do resource that department, that we don't kick it in the long grass to after LGR and things like that, and that we're actually working in tandem on having an active team in place alongside initiatives like Churchgate.
Councillor Munster.
Thank you. I just do have a few questions with respect to this report. So the first is looking at page 55. I note that from 2024 onwards, we haven't had any capital receipts. Now, that's not necessarily concerning because, you can only spend reserves once, as Ian Cooper says. But with respect to the sale of the land at the Snipe in Weston, I remember we had quite a long council meeting on that, and the proposed development of land on Radburn Way. Can you give us a little bit of more detail as to why these matters aren't proceeding? And with respect to the local plan review and the call for sites, has this council proposed any sites for development within that as part of that consultation process?
I think I'm going to pass that question for the detail to Phil. Although I can talk about Radburn Way till the end of time, as that's in my ward. But Phil, I think you can probably do a better job on the wider question.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'll deal with the call for sites first of all. Yes, we have engaged with that process. It's obviously a staged process. We did a strategic review of the whole portfolio, and we have put forward, off the top of my head, about 8 or 9 potential sites. Some of those are keeping existing planning allocations live in the new local plan, because we have to resubmit and say we'd like it to stay live. Others are new ones. Some of them are in collaboration with adjoining owners, if that can be secured. So that's at the very early stages. Later on this month, I've got a meeting with the planning department to review those, about which ones are viable, which ones need further information. We'll go back through the loop with Councillor Thomas just to make sure we are happy for them to carry on, because obviously at the moment they're not in the public domain, those allocation options, but in the draft, before it goes in the draft local plan, we'll make sure we've got sign off on those. But that's dealt with that. So yeah, we are actively engaged as the council, as landowner. Radburn Way, when we looked at that site, I'm going on my memory now, because obviously it was quite a detailed report that we took to Cabinet for the site to be allocated for an open space habitat reserve and sort of biodiversity base. And the reason was access to the site was no longer, the development was no longer viable to bring forward with no secured access to the site. So once we did the work on that, it became clearer and clearer it wasn't going to be viable, and it was better served taking out of progressing that and to bring it into a biodiversity site. The report had a part 1 and a part 2. It is online, so I suggest perhaps review back the reasoning for that as part of that. And the other site is the Snipe at Weston, which again, we entered into a conditional contract just under 12 months ago with Crowdace Homes. Unfortunately, they've done a great deal of work bringing that forward, and a number of hurdles have been just too difficult to overcome. One of the biggest ones was the surface water drainage, is the housing density as well. And the formula that was in the contract, they were no longer able to deliver on. And reluctantly, they did not put a planning application in within the long stop date, and that meant then that the conditional contract can come to an end, which it has done. So we have the site back. They did pay a non-refundable £100,000 deposit to us and the adjoining landowner, which they lose. So for them, it was a big expenditure and a loss, and it's regrettable. We're now in discussions with the adjoining owner about how we may bring that site forward, and we'll report further once we've done that work. We're looking at various options.
Thank you very much for that. Could I just... Brilliant, thank you. As we all know, the future viability of the Churchgate project depends ultimately on trying to improve visibility of car parks elsewhere in Hitchin so that we're able to then redevelop the Port Mill East and West car parks and potentially St Mary's Church, depending on, of course, whatever scheme the council and its partners goes forward with. Just noting in the report on page 58, the review into the behaviour of people with respect to car parks has been completed. There have been a number of points of which have been proposed for action. Could I ask, where are we with respect to actioning those points to improve the visibility of those car parks that aren't necessarily the people's choice at this moment in time?
Steve, I'm not sure if you or Rumi best placed to answer that one.
I will start and then we'll hand over to Rumi if there's anything additional to add. So regarding the potential digital signage, we have put forward, which will again be in the budget papers, which will be coming to you soon, that as an option, and we're hoping therefore that gets approved, and we'll be looking to do digital signage within Hitchin, and by having that should make it therefore clear what spaces are available, and obviously in appropriate car parks, and hopefully will help to have better usage of the Learidge car park. And we're also looking at ways of how the Learidge car park can also internally be better signed to ensure that people are clearly aware of the number of spaces as you start in at the top and work your way down. We will also be liaising with our planning and parking teams with regards to other initiatives, which at this point in time, I don't think we've actually had that chance to get right into detail, but I know that the items which were in the report from the work which was undertaken, Rumi and the team have already started to have those conversations with relevant officers within the authority. So we need to start then looking at those and then figuring out how we can start to implement them or look at ways to implement them. But the first one is looking at the digital parking. So I don't know if there's anything else to add on that, Rumi.
Thanks, Steve. Nothing too much to add, just to say that in addition to the VMS, the digital signage, as Steve says, we are working with our colleagues in the parking team, really just to make sure that we are aligned to initiatives and thinking within the local plan. So the direction of travel anyway for the council is to embrace active travel initiatives, climate resilience thinking. So we're aligning our mitigation measures for the Churchgate project with respect to car parking, aligning those to parking policies and the future forward thinking for the council. So yeah, working closely with parking colleagues.
And then I'll,
Okay.
if that's all right. I think certainly with everything that's going on in Churchgate, it's really important that we build resilience into these signs, because we don't want to find ourselves in a position whereby, we've got signs of which are then inaccurate that then need to be replaced in a couple of years, because that would be a complete and utter waste of money. So it could be an idea and maybe a suggestion to work with the Highways Department at the County Council to see whether or not there's any sort of partnership working that can happen there, so that those signs, if they're not being used for parking, they could be used for sort of traffic information, that sort of thing. Just a suggestion to try and save a little bit of money.
Thank you for that. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you. I'm a bit of obviously a bit of a Johnny come lately to this, because a lot of this stuff was way before I was elected. But on the Churchgate part of the report, and I appreciate it's a long and detailed report, a lot of people involved with it, and there's some very long words in there, not all of which I understand. But could I ask a really simple question? What is it liable to cost the taxpayers? I mean, I'm not expecting down to the last penny, but can you give us a ballpark, somebody?
Yeah, Martin, sorry, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Prescott. I know this is probably a frustrating answer, but no, and that's the point of the viability study, because the range of things being considered on affordable housing, has such an impact, or whether or not you have a supermarket has such an impact, or the quality of your public realm, the extent to which you open up the river, that there are lots of sort of variabilities which are sort of going through, but the basis that the scheme was approved on was that over the 40-year life of the project, it would achieve an income level equivalent to what that volume of land in ownership to the council currently delivers. And so hopefully that we'll have a crisper and clearer answer to you soon. But it's the range of sort of variables, and I think one of the things that everyone is very sensitive to, and the public consultation was quite clear around, wanting the right level of development, not overdevelopment, wanting the right quality of provision, alongside financial viability. Not sure whether Rumi or Steve want to add sort of other comments to that.
Thank you, Tamsin. I guess the only couple of points to add is, if you were to look at the Part 2 report, which went to the July 4 council meeting, that does set out financial information within there. Our aim, our aspiration is ultimately for it to be a viable scheme. And as Tamsin has mentioned, the original business case states that the aim is for it to be no less financially worse than what we currently are. So therefore, there wouldn't be a cost to the taxpayers and to the council, because it would ultimately be a viable scheme. Therefore, it would generate a surplus. However, we are still undertaking the viability of that, and that will be part of the next process that we go through, and that will come to members. So all that information will be available, but there is information already there available to members as set out in the July for Council Part 2 report.
So yeah, just bearing in mind that we don't have a Part 2 on this one. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just about to say, I'm mindful of the fact that we don't have Part 2. But I mean, there are dozens of officers involved with this, and they're spending a lot of time and effort, and obviously costing a lot of money. We don't have any ballpark whatsoever of what this is liable to cost. None at all. So I see you're shaking your head there. So how can we determine, not necessarily today, but at any time, viability, if we actually have not the faintest idea what it's going to cost us? Or we do have the faintest idea what it's going to cost us, but we need to go to Part 2 to find, in which case I'll rest.
I was shaking my head at the dozens of officers. We would love to have dozens of officers in the department, Councillor Prescott. It's a much smaller unit of officer count than that. But Rumi, perhaps you'd like to answer this question.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Thomas. I appreciate this may be frustrating. However, we are still at what would be considered a very early stage of the project in terms of assessing viability, looking at different options, as Councillor Thomas has talked about the different elements of the project, the housing, the density, the public realm. I think there's enough there for us to understand that this is a project of immense value, and not just monetary value, but it's the wider regenerative benefits for the community, for the local economy, and that's obviously why it's a flagship project. The viability work that's been done so far is high level. It's not possible to do detailed viability work at this stage because we haven't yet come to the preferred option of what the delivery route will be. Are the council going to deliver this directly? Are we going to do it in partnership with the developer? Once we have that decision made and we are, for example, going out to market and talking to partners, we'll be able to really get down to the nuts and bolts of how this thing is put together in terms of housing numbers and in terms of receipts and in terms of land values in the shopping centre. So until we get to that stage where we are, for example, in partnership and we're negotiating numbers, we're not able to, no one would be able to sort of produce a really sort of in-depth viability report. We will get there. We won't be delivering this project without the nuts and bolts and the actual figures. But at this stage, it's too early in the process to provide that sort of cost. What we do know is that this is a project worth doing for many reasons, not least because we want to create a 21st century town centre for Hitchin. But yeah, as I say, we're early in the process, and once we're in further conversations, we'll get to that detailed sort of viability assessment.
And just Councillor Prescott, again, not just on the sort of dozens of officer point, but also on the no idea point, the July report does actually set out quite, even though it's top level, there is a level of financial detail in that. So I think to sort of portray it as a complete unknown is sort of not really representative of the work in that report. So I would just go back to the part 2 in that report, which does show some detail, although not as much as I know we all want, but we will get there. And I think obviously a scheme of this type and a redevelopment of this type, they are long projects. They do require patience, and they have to go through certain governance arrangements. So obviously it does take time, and it's important that we do all of those sort of steps properly and robustly.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add on, because you've just had very comprehensive response there from Councillor Thomas and Rumi. Once we have that information, once we are in a position to understand how we're moving forward, the discussions we've been having with the project board is we will look to do an all-member briefing. So once we know, and once we're in a position to share that, we will certainly do so. The dozens of officer pointers already been picked up, but it's certainly way less than 10.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Should we move Councillor Wright Mason?
Yeah, thank you very much. If I'll be all right to switch the focus about half a mile down the road. It's obviously great to see so much work being done, especially in Hitchin. I just thought I'd ask a question about Charnwood House, which I know is something very important to a lot of people. There's a few references to setting out kind of a different vision for the project, and obviously a few mentions of a kind of reports that might go to cabinet. I just wonder if it's possible to get an early insight into what that detailed vision might be.
Thank you, Councillor Wright Mason. I'll provide a short response initially, but I'm sure Phil will have additional points. As you'll know, the Charnwood property comes with covenants around community use, and our view is that the view of the administration and the authority is that those must be upheld. That we want to uphold those covenants. Charnwood, though, is a heritage building, and if you're in Letchworth, anyone who follows like the Letchworth Heritage Foundation and all the challenges that heritage buildings are expensive, their overheads are really difficult. You need to have all sorts of organizational capabilities to be able to take on heritage buildings, and so what we need is a partner who is able to deliver the covenants that come with that building, but also with the organizational ability to take on and hold in stewardship a building, even on preferential lease terms and those sorts of arrangements. And so one of the things that I've commissioned from Phil, which he's produced or in the process of producing, is an options report around what are the range of options, given that the authority did go to market locally, did seek and had a range of inquiries from different parties and very strong from very strong potential partners, but there is the ability to uphold both the ability to manage a building of that type alongside the upholding the covenant. So I'm not sure, Phil, if you want to give any more detail.
Yes, and I'm very happy to come in. I think what I would say is certainly the vision has not changed. I think the aspiration, that's exactly as it has been stated for a number of years, really, which is that it's to bring it back into use to support a community-based activities and recognizing the value of the asset to local groups and the wider town centre. So that has not changed at all. What I was tasked to do was to produce an options paper, which was a sort of thorough, in-depth look at the history of the site. I defined community use in a lot of detail, so what may be acceptable and mix of uses. So that was refined. I looked at some of the strategic considerations we need to consider, and then I went through the options, going from do nothing to currently holding the property as it is vacant, which was obviously not an acceptable one. Looked at disposal, sale of the freehold, through to a range of options for letting, and the likely preferred option is to go back to the market regionally and nationally with a proper offer, which will be fully costed, what the council will put into the property, what sort of terms and aspirations, and seek a partner to take the overarching lease and deliver a project which is acceptable to the council and sort of viable. So I think that's all there is to say on that at the moment. There's more work to do before we can report back formally and go public on the marketing, but that is the direction of travel. We've got a lot of interested parties already who we've got a register of, and we will keep them informed and give them an opportunity at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Councillor Chalmers.
Yes, thank you very much for very comprehensive report. I'm just going to go back to Churchgate though, because we were reminded earlier on in the evening that the work of this council is sort of like winding down, but our time is limited, and this is a major project, and I'm just sort of trying to get my head around what sort of point where we're making, if we make decisions as a council on how to go forward with Churchgate, how will this be impacted by the undertaking of a new council that would want to come in, and actually how's this going to be sort of managed as a handover? Because the new council, I'm sure, would want to have some sort of like say in how Churchgate should be developed. And I meant, Councillor Bryant talked about a legacy, but I'm just worried that time is running out and that we get to a point where we start to wonder whether we have the time to be able to what to do. So I'm just trying to get my head around that. If you could help me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. I'll hand over to Rumi on that point substantively, but just the time, the 27th of February project board meeting is a significant one, and the goal is to bring it forward in spring for the next sort of major decision point on viability. But so in terms of the current phase we're in, we are sort of nearing the next milestone, as it were, in decision making for the project, which obviously it's a couple of months later than we wanted, but that was broadly around wanting the project board wanting a bit more scrutiny on certain aspects of various reports and things. So I think it was valid that it was deferred in that term. But Rumi, I think there's a wider point there that Councillor Chalmers was making that I think you would be well placed to comment on. Thank you.
Can I just jump in first, just to talk about the LGR bit, because as you'll all appreciate, if I was on Mastermind at the moment, it would be my specialist subject. And then Rumi can come in and talk about what that means once I've set that context, what that means for the project timeline. So assuming that government works to the timeline it has set out, and it looks like they are, because the statutory consultation is imminent. I'll be emailing everyone tomorrow with an update on that. There will be shadow elections to the shadow unitary authorities in May 2027. Prior to that, it's likely government will set up a joint committee made up of the existing councils to have oversight of the process until such time as the shadow authorities go live. And then once the shadow authorities are live, there will be constraints placed on existing authorities around what they're able to do without that also being signed off by the shadow authorities. So that doesn't prevent you doing something. It's just an extra layer of approval that is required. And that includes any financial decisions over a certain threshold. And whatever threshold government chooses, Churchgate will be over that threshold if it's a delivery model proposed that requires the council to be involved in the funding of it. You'll appreciate there are delivery models that might not require that. But the financial implications of any of the models are such that it would therefore require sign off by the new unitaries. So we need to factor that into the plans. Goes back to the point made earlier. If we come up with a good, viable scheme, why would that's making a return to the councils? Why would a new unitary look to cease that? But ultimately, that is going to be their decision. But over to Rumi to talk about how that then factors into our considerations for the timeline.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Councillor. You know, we are in a period where, you know, this transition is quite critical to our thinking for this project. On one hand, we do need to move quickly so that we have our ducks in a row, so to speak. We have our evidence base. We have as much information as possible to be able to make a sound decision on the way forward for the delivery of this project. This is a complex town centre regeneration scheme. What we know is that the fundamentals are sound, and the current focus, as you've heard, is on structuring the delivery and the risk properly so that the project is as viable as it can be and is investable, particularly in the context of local government reorganisation. So whilst there is an urgency to get this project sort of advanced as much as we possibly can before, you know, a new shadow authority, we also need to get it right. And yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing. We've taken, as Councillor Tom said, we've taken a little bit more time to just kind of scrutinise where we are in terms of certain elements, but the intention is to move forward as quickly as possible. We're looking ahead to the next phase, and until we know the actual delivery route, the type of delivery, we're unable to sort of understand what the actual timeframes are. But hopefully, as I say, once we get to that point, which should be quite soon, Councillor Thomas has mentioned the 27th of February workshop. Once we understand the delivery route we're going down, things will become much more clear in terms of actual timeframes.
Yes, if you have a follow-up.
Yeah, I just want thank you very much. That's very useful. What since the 27th of February, is there a sort of timeline where it will be brought back for the council to be informed of any sort of decisions? I'm just aware that, you know, that at the moment we're sort of, yes, we're being pressed by by this sort of almost, you said, an urgency. Yes, it's right, with LGR coming up, but also that it's been a project that's taken a long time. So it's something that we haven't been able to rush. I'm just want to how we make sure we get that balance right, as it were, and when the council would actually have a chance to have some sort of say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. I think I think they're in the previous report, and Steve, if you can fact check me on this, just because I want to make sure my recollection is correct, that there are milestones out like of phases of like where we'd anticipate to be, and to come back that again for a project of this type, we've not taken lots of time. I think it's just because this is the first time we've tried to redevelop one of our town centres. That this authority hasn't done that before, and so for a project of its nature, it does take what feels like a lot of time, but for projects of this type, it's not. So just wanted to show on that. We will be coming to full council prior to a decision being made, and it will be around in spring. So we're aiming for, I believe, the April meeting, but I don't. But it will be in spring. Will be when we're coming on the timeline for the next decision. Steve, just to check, is there anything you wanted to add on that?
The only thing to add is in terms of the process, our understanding at this point in time is that the first the next stage decision would be going to cabinet, but we'd have an all members briefing to ensure that all members were involved in the process before it went to cabinet, and also there'd be an opportunity for it to come to overview and scrutiny. So, and as Tamsin said, our aim is ideally to get to the April meeting. I think it also depends how the next project board goes, but we ultimately at project board need to ensure that we're happy that full due diligence has been done, and therefore we're able to bring something forward. This is in a way once in a lifetime opportunity. We need to make sure what we bring forward is the best that we can deliver based on all of the different variables, but there will be definitely time for involvement with all members. And then also as we go through the project, there'll be other times which will, and I'm not going to go into the current sort of potential timeframes, because as Rumi's explained, that will depend upon the delivery, but there'll be plenty of involvement as we go through the project with members, all members, and relevant consultation with the public, etc.
Super. Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just dug out my 8 follow-up questions on Churchgate. No, I haven't. Just no more. At least from me. No, just a bit of a different tack, and back to the economic strategy. And I guess both probably the strategy itself, but also the work of the enterprise team. I mean, one of the so I'm recently district council, also parish councillor in Nebworth, and I've always been surprised at the sort of hidden quantity and diversity of local businesses, small businesses. So that we have a lot in Nebworth, and I think it's recognised in the strategy as one of the village economic hubs. You just don't necessarily see it because all you see is the shop front of retail, but there's a lot of small businesses in the sort of 0 to 9 FTE sort of category around, both in the village and also in some of the other more rural parts where there's little hubs and units and things like that. And that's kind of recognised in the economic strategy. It mentions Nebworth, it mentions Ashwell, probably I'd chuck Codicott in there as well, although it doesn't mention it. But a lot of the things that we talk about and the projects are all related to things in the towns. And so I'm just thinking, what could you give an outline? It doesn't really talk about it in the strategy, but what is the nature of some of the practical work that the team does in terms of trying to promote growth of small businesses in some of the villages with economic hubs? Because obviously we're putting a lot of housing there from a local plan point of view in a lot of these areas, and it would be great to see if we can build up the small business community as well, so they don't just end up being commuter hubs, and we actually have local jobs there for local people, as it were. So I was just wondering what to get some flavour of the sort of things that go on with the team on that front.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, I think initially, just want to say as well, when we say team, it's a half a post that we share with East Hertfordshire as the current allocation, and obviously, much of it is the administration of the SPF program, and also supporting joint initiatives like things like Hertfordshire Futures, which is looking county-wide, and running various schemes. Steve, do you want to sort of respond on the I think the really valid questions about the sort of rural community piece?
Yes, so I think what I will say is at this point in time, I don't have any detail to be sharing on that. And I think the main reason for that, the main reason for it is because, as Tamsin said, we only have half a post. Also, that member of staff currently is off. However, as the strategy sets out, there will be a work program pulled together. We will be going out to recruit for those roles. Once we have those individuals in, be more than happy to come back to this committee to provide more detail on that. And again, I can speak to the relevant service manager on any specific things which we have done in recent times over there. Unfortunately, I don't have the detail for that today, so I wouldn't want to be saying things which I'm not fully aware of on that specific area. So I'm more than happy, as I said, to provide any information that I can get from the service manager and provide that back to the committee.
Yeah, I mean, the report. One of the things I really liked about the strategy that they land on was sort of recognition that the boundary lines of a district council might not be the boundary lines of your economy, and that the strategy has this sort of looking out and looking in framework, where part of it is about resourcing, knowing who our businesses are in the council, what their needs are, and what they're dependent on to thrive, like where are they selling into in the region or nationally. But also looking out and recognizing where our near neighbours in towns like Stevenage or Luton, or also going as far as Cambridge and London, have pressures that we're well placed to serve. So the film industry, for example, will be one example that's in the strategy. But obviously we need the officers in place to put in place the actual action plan and to be able to determine what those practical measures are supporting that strategy. So I think it's a great question, and one that we have to keep in the front of our minds as the team is coming together.
Yeah, great. I was going to say to Stephen, once the resourcing gets in place, I mean, do feel free to reach out to me, and I'm sure other ward councillors where it's relevant, because, for example, I know there's things in the neighbourhood plan for Nebworth that specifically talk about this. I'm sure we can actually try and help and contribute and act as a bit of a conduit into knowing what's going on in the local areas about how best to help that team when it's there to drive some of that stuff. So happy to do that.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Clayton.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to bring it back to LGR yet again, but given LGR, presumably the future of uses of the offices here is in some question. So I was just wondering what consequences that has for the decarbonisation efforts.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, at the moment, all roads lead back to LGR one way or another. So short answer is we don't yet know what it means for any of the buildings we own, including the DCO. The work on that hasn't been started. We've done some baselining in terms of understanding what assets each of the councils hold, but until we know the unitary footprints, we can't make decisions around where they might be headquartered, because obviously we don't know who will be grouped with who. We don't know the staffing numbers. Things like the flexible working policies of the new unitaries will affect the staff to desk ratios we need, and therefore the amount of office space we need. What I will say about this particular building is we have Careline situated downstairs, and they are going to continue running a very vital function for Hertfordshire residents post LGR. So my gut reaction, and therefore, I appreciate this is a public meeting, not for quoting on, is that this building will certainly continue to be used in the immediate aftermath of LGR, because I very much doubt that we will have been able to sort of move all the tech that is needed for Careline to a new building in time for them to be relocated 1st of April 28. So there will still be a usage in the short term. Whether that extends to the medium or longer term, I don't know, and that will be decisions of the new unitaries at some point in the future.
Councillor Munster.
Thank you very much. I promise this will be my last question on Churchgate. But I think in terms of material update, I know that very much in the early stages, the administration was very keen to make sure that the public were engaged and involved and that they knew what was going on. But if you're a member of the public, you don't receive the briefings that we do, and you're not aware of any developments of which are happening. And I'm a little bit concerned that actually the last material development that happened in terms of the public eye was very much at the beginning of last year. So when can we expect a next round of public engagement with respect to this project, and when can we expect members of the public to have an idea and an understanding as to the costs associated with it?
Thank you, Ralph. I very much doubt that's your last question on Churchgate ever, but maybe tonight. Rumi, are you able to answer Councillor Munster, please? Thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you. I would like to think that the next stage of public engagement would be alongside an announcement that it's happening. Here we are, we're going forward. This is the way we're doing it. This is who we're doing it with. And to sort of be able to outline a concrete sort of timeline. So I think that would be the next stage. Please do correct me, Steve, if you think that's not the case, but it's not planned, and it's also not really the right time to be engaging with the public at this stage when we as a council are not certain yet. We haven't made a decision yet, as we've said, about the routes forward, the how. So once we know the how and we are progressing and moving forward, I think that comes with a very positive announcement to the public, which the engagement, although I wasn't involved in it last year, I have read the engagement reports and I've spoken to colleagues. What I understand as a top line is that the community just want this project to be delivered. They want it to go ahead. So yeah, I think it would be a very positive thing for us to move as quickly as we can and be able to announce to the community alongside a sort of concrete timeline of engagement.
And Councillor Prescott.
Thank you. Following on from Councillor Ward's kind of general thrust, well over 90% of the working age population in the UK are employed within companies that have 10 or fewer employees. And I can't imagine that North Herts is going to be radically different from that percentage. So I'm struggling to get my head around what the council is able to or thinks it should be doing to support small businesses, many of whom are facing existential problems at the moment. So a couple of quick questions, which I do not expect answers from tonight, but I would like to hear at some stage, how many small businesses are there in North Hertfordshire? And by that, I mean businesses with 10 or fewer employees. How many of those businesses are facing, as I say, existential problems at the moment? And what, if anything, is North Herts District Council either willing or able to do to provide any assistance at all? Or does the council just not feel that that's part of its remit? I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm just curious.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. I think that one thing I would do is definitely direct you to the evidence base underpinning the economic development strategy. I don't want to make up a number, but I know that the breakdown is actually there. The evidence base, if you're a nerd for these things, it's incredibly deep, the work that was done, and it was a really impressive document. So I think I think you've said, I think I've noted before that that's something that you're quite passionate about. So I would make sure that it's on the public record, the evidence base. So I would definitely refer you to looking at that. And I think also the authority has done a number of things, particularly during COVID. There was a response scheme, and there have been other grant schemes to try and support small businesses through really difficult periods. None of that is to sort of not recognise that there are challenges on small businesses as well. But I'm not sure, Steve, if we've got more we want to say now, or if this is something that obviously it is a focus of the strategy, the SME sector, because it is such a huge part of our local economy, or whether it's something that, again, we really want that strategy resourced so it can be effective. But Steve, do you have anything you want to add?
I have nothing to add. I'm happy to deal with this offline. And as I said, I'm happy to report back at any future meeting once we have more information. I'm not prepared to be saying things which I don't have the information in front of me, but I do know that there has been work done, and I will deal with that directly with yourself if you wish.
Yeah.
Very briefly, no, I appreciate that, and I don't want to put you on the spot. I do think councils have a role to play, but I speak from personal experience. We have a networking group that we host at one of my pubs, and we have tried and tried and tried to get any representatives of district or county. We actually had the chief exec of the county council turned up a couple of months ago, a very interesting presentation she made. But in terms of actually helping small businesses, I mean, I can tell you what will happen if I ask on this Friday morning when we have our next meeting, if I ask the assembled businesses, what kind of help have you received from the district or the county council? What kind of help would you like from the district or the county council? I don't think there'll actually be laughter, but there'll be a lot of silence going on because it's just not happening. And again, I'm not trying to start a fight. We're all on the same team, but I do think there is something, or certainly a lot more in real practical terms, that district and county councils can be doing to support the SME communities and all of the tens of thousands of people, even just in North Arts District Council area, that rely upon those small businesses. Sorry.
Well, you did, but thank you for that. And thank you very much, Steve, for offering to take that later offline. Appreciate that. Councillor Billing, you've been waiting ever so patiently.
Thank you. From when I was looking over the report, I noticed that we had grant funding for 2024 to 2025, which is why we had an income, like a higher income than this year. And that was to do with the community lottery. Are we seeking anything else for the next financial year to help with funding of this?
Sorry, Sadie, could you be a bit more? Could you provide a reference? Just, I think I want to understand the detail.
Yeah, it's paragraph 8.3.4 in the report, stating how we had funding. Just wanting to know if we are hopefully getting funding, or if not, for the next financial year.
Yeah. Steve, are you able to speak to that one?
Yeah, thank you. That was just a one-off opportunity. So again, we do look for other similar opportunities, but that was a one-off opportunity at the time.
Okay, super. Thank you. And Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small bit of fact to help Councillor Prescott sleep at night. The economic strategy, page 5, the figures I'm just reading out, so I'm not making it up, Steve. About 5,500 enterprises in the district, of which 90% employ 0 to 9 people. So that's about 5,000. And there are about 8,800 self-employed people. So it's very big. Yeah.
Thank you for that point. Okay, that brings my questions to an end. Thank you so much for the time. Our recommendation here is that we note that report, and I think we're noting the incredible complexity of this directorate, the incredibly important projects that are managed and governed within it. We've talked about the importance of small businesses, and rural enterprise. We've talked about Churchgate and everything else. Can I have a proposer and seconder for the report? A proposer, Councillor
Happy
Clayton.
to propose it.
Thank you. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ward. And we can go to a debate if there's anything further to add to that. Any further debate? I think we've had lots of questions and lots of questions answered. So let's go to the vote then. Thank you.
That motion is carried, Chair.
Thank you, Robbie. Now I'm mindful that we're going to have we need to move some personnel around. So can I just suggest we take a very short break, as short as we possibly can, and we'll be back in again in about 10 minutes. Thank you. And welcome back after the break. We're at point 11, the local plan review, and I'd like to invite Councillor Wright to present.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is to note the report that went to Cabinet on the 20th of January, which outlined the new local plan making system and what actions are required to ensure adoption of the North Herts local plan by the end of 2028. So just as background, Cabinet agreed to review the local plan in January 2024, and a timetable was agreed so that would enable adoption of the plan by the end of 2027. However, progress has stalled pending new government regulations and guidance. So the original timetable was predicated on the assumption that legislative changes would be introduced by September 25, but unfortunately government guidance on the new system wasn't actually issued until November, and with the legislation expected in January, which still hasn't happened, but we're hoping that it might happen in the next few weeks, with commencement maybe in April, May. So obviously there's been a delay to the timetable. The new system being proposed by government is much more streamlined than the current process, with a statutory 30-month timetable for the plan preparation and the examination, and that's preceded by a mandatory 4-month what they call get ready period. There are also a number of mandatory gateways and consultations and requirement for review after 5 years after adoption, which is a major change. So members will have had the opportunity to receive information on the new system at the members' local plan workshop last night. So in light of changes to the system, we are proposing a revised timetable for production of the North Herts local plan, obviously based on the new requirements, which is presented in Appendix A. And the 30-month timeframe would allow completion by the end of 2028. But North Herts are actually planning to submit for examination earlier, prior to LGR in April 2028. So as well as approval by Cabinet, the revised timetable and approach for the local plan was approved by the cross-party strategic planning board in December. So it has had that extra layer of scrutiny by members, and it will continue to throughout the process. So there will be regular updates to the strategic planning board as the timetable progresses. Obviously, taking forward the accelerated timetable is subject to the strategic planning team being fully staffed, which unfortunately isn't at the moment, but further recruitment is underway. So the local plan timetable will be kept under review in line with resource availability, and updated as appropriate. And as I said earlier, regular reports on this will go to the strategic planning board, and so there will be tight monitoring. So moving to the recommendation, firstly, I want to say I'd like to thank Rachel and the team for all the work they've done in managing the process in light of all the uncertainty on the national framework. And then just finally, moving forwards to the recommendation, overview and scrutiny are asked to note the broad direction of travel for the local plan review, pending formal laying and enactment of the relevant legislation and regulation, and provide any commentary as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Can I ask the first question this time? Can I ask when do you and how do you when do you see scrutiny fitting into this timetable as we go through? Have you thought about when that might happen?
I mean, we are going to have to be a bit flexible because the timetable may need to be revised once we actually get the legislation. But we will be building it in. I mean, obviously, Strategic Planning Board meets once a month. So the intention is to give them regular updates. But as I say, I think it's probably too early to say exactly when, because we do have to wait for the legislation. I don't know if you want to add something, Rachel.
Sure. So in addition to the strategic planning board, we're going to have regular member workshops throughout. So we had our initial one last night. We're going to have about 3 scoping workshops, about 4 policy development workshops, as well as workshops around site allocations and viability briefings. But also when we do take key decisions to cabinet, so on consultation periods where that will be on the proposed content and evidence-based document, as well as the draft local plan. That would be an opportunity at that point as well to kind of scrutinise the plan as it comes forward in terms of like the normal decision-making process.
Thank you. So you see that as between Gateway 2 and 3 in that consultation phase? Or do you?
No, so prior to that, so
Prior.
so after Gateway 1, there is a the proposed content and evidence-based document consultation. So we will need to take that through the normal decision-making process. So at that point, overview and scrutiny can get involved then. And then just before the draft plan gets approved to be consulted on, again, it can go through that decision-making process and come here too.
Thank you. So that gives us 2 more bites of the cherry then. Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other questions? Councillor Munster.
Thank you very much. I think we all appreciate the importance of securing a local plan in light of local government reorganisation to try and protect North Herts as much as possible from speculative development. And I think so in that strain it is most welcome. With respect to the Gateway 3, so I note the examination transcends the period which effectively this authority will be abolished and all responsibility would be handed over to the successor unitary authority, whatever shape or form that fits. In the past, how has that worked with where in other areas where local government reorganisation has occurred? Because one would have thought that actually, whilst that authority would support the planning document of which is before it, it's not necessarily duty bound to do so.
I mean, the timetable will carry on regardless of transitioning to LGR. And obviously the local authority will progress it at whatever stage it's at. And the expectation is that the local plan will cover the North Herts area until a new local plan is produced for the new unitary. I mean, I don't know, Rachel, whether you know what's happened with other authorities.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of other authorities, no, I don't know exactly, but the expectation is everybody in the rest of the country is in the same position, that the new legislation has not been passed yet, and there's a 30-month window to do new plans. So most local plans that are going through the new system will probably go through LGR, and there's a kind of government expectation that that new authority takes those forwards and do not pause them. And they're probably going to put something in the regulations to require that to happen. Yeah, so I think also the other issue is when you go through that stage, we're obviously going to have submitted by that stage. And I think there's a currently in the guidance, it suggests that a new authority can't withdraw a local plan. It can only be the inspector at that point that can withdraw a local plan. So they're trying to avoid that happening.
Thank you. Yes, please do.
Thank you. So my understanding is the whole idea about having this local plan review is to expand the operational period of the local plan to, I think, 2045. Even with the slips that we've seen on the timeline, is it still the intention for that the end of the operative period of the plan to be 2045, or are we potentially looking at extending it further, subject to whenever government lays the legislation in Parliament?
Well, all plans need to have like a 10 to 15 year time horizon regardless, and then they're supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, so it's always a rolling forward of that review period. When we get into LGR, it's expected hopefully within the first 5 years that there'll be a new plan at that point that covers the whole new area, and then that would look forward for 10 to 15 years. So they always kind of, yeah, so it's a rolling process in that sense.
Thank you, Councillor Ward.
Yeah, I think my question's related to the same topic as Councillor Munster and partly been answered, but I'm just wondering, has there been any discussions within the LGR process that you maybe have been party to with all the other bits of Hertfordshire as to how actually this would work, or are we just in uncharted territory? Because I'm just conscious that the I can see it could be useful to have it, because if my understanding is right, even if it's draft subject to the examination, it still can bear some weight, albeit limited weight in planning terms and all that sort of stuff. So I can see it having some use, but I was just wondering how that stuff gets taken forward, because it just feels like it's an awful lot of work if ultimately somebody decides at that point in 2028 just throw it in the bin and say, okay, well, we're going to do a new one for our shiny new unitary. So I was just wondering if there's been any discussion about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess on the same point that I made before, that the government's going to put some, as far as I know, regulations around the new authority can't put it in the bin as such, that it's only an inspector could withdraw a local plan at that point, unless, there's actual technical reasons for it. But regardless, any new authority will take at least 5 years to produce another local plan at that stage. And the expectation is through LGR, all those joining authorities will be at slightly different stages. They'll be finishing at slightly different stages, but a new plan will be started at that new period, and they'll kind of run into each other. So in terms of how it works in practice, it's likely to be that those local plans will cover those geographical areas until our new plan takes over in sort of 5 years from, about 2030 to 2033. So if we didn't have a plan in place at that point, then obviously you'd be very open to speculative development and all sorts of things. So I don't think a new entity would want that either.
Yes.
Sorry, no, thank you. Okay, so I just to bring it home, it feels like the criticality, therefore, what he said is making sure we don't have any further delays to that the Gateway 3 milestone of it's going to be really crucial to make sure it gets submitted into examination before this authority disappears into the dust.
Yes, I mean it is very challenging, because the current timetable that's in Appendix 1 is very challenging as it is, and that's predicated on the fact we'd already have the legislation in place. As they said, it would come out in early 2026. The more it gets delayed into March, April, May, it causes all sorts of problems, because there is a mandatory 4-month get ready period that you can't start your plan until you've at least done some certain requirements. And then obviously when you're producing the plans, depending on where committee cycles fall, where some holidays fall in terms of how consultation will work, it all starts to bunch up quite a lot. And in terms of the other end of it, in 2028, the requirements after going through the consultation, you need to make amendments to your plan, and then you have to go through that gateway period, which is a sort of 4 to 6 week period as well. So it's already quite tight. But obviously, once we know exactly when the regulations come in, we can replan it, and we're already going to see if we can kind of parallel process some of the processes that we're doing to make sure that we can progress that as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Councillor Wright Mason.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, another LGR question, so it may have the same answer, so I apologise if I'm duplicating. But I just wondered if there's any other kind of quirks or additional considerations about local planning regarding one of the LGR proposals about splitting part of the district into another, obviously, authority that wouldn't have all been North Hart. I assume it would be the same either way, but I just wondered if there's any other quirks that might.
No, I think once we know what the geography is, then we'll have to take that on board at that point.
And Councillor Munster.
Thank you. I mean, I wasn't going to ask, but I think there's a pertinent follow-up question for that. If we are once we know the geography with respect to LGR, and we have to take account of that, does that mean, for example, that the vast majority of the current district of North Herts would have to, for example, meet the full requirement for North Hertfordshire within that sort of, defined area, or would it then be sort of evenly split?
So you mean if the North Herts was split up in the two? Sorry, is that what you meant?
Yeah. So effectively, say government, and I can't remember the figure off the top of my head, but say government is wanting us to increase our housing targets by 5,000, and therefore currently that 5,000 would be distributed amongst North Hertfordshire, the district as it is currently is, and then we find out in April that the government is going to split us into four, which is what Councillor Wright Mason's question sort of is predicated on. I think, what is it, about a third of the district is going elsewhere into, an Eastern Unitary Authority. Would government expect us, as the remainder, Hitchin, Letchworth, and the southern rural villages, to meet that demand of 5,000 new homes within that sort of reduced area, or would it be split evenly?
I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid.
We don't know yet.
So I think if we could get a response to that, that would be very much appreciated, because certainly that would be a real cause for concern if it is as potentially I've set out. We recently had the call for sites. How many sites were identified within that, and when can we expect to see those sites being made public?
Yes, so we haven't made the number public yet. We're just going through a sieving process to get rid of some of the sites where there's absolutely no prospect of them coming forward. In terms of making that initial list public, regardless of whether they're fully suitable or not, and we'll go through to the allocations, probably be around the springtime. But once we've got the new system in place and we've got all of our timetable and the publishing our notices and all the other requirements, then we can publish all that information properly.
Thank you. Do you have another question?
More, I promise. As you may be aware, we are currently undertaking a task and finish group looking into the effectiveness of developer contributions. That task and finish group met last week to agree a number of recommendations, and it will be reported to at this committee next month. Is there an assurance that can be given that, subject to, of course, the normal scrutiny processes and procedures at going to cabinet, etc., but could an assurance be given that actually recommendations of which are going to be taken forward from that task and finish group would then form part of the policies contained within the local plans surrounding developer contributions in North Herts?
About this task and finish group, and I don't know about your conclusions, so I think we need to take this offline and actually make sure that we share some information on it for us to make a decision about whether.
There's 500 million people listening online who didn't hear a word of that because you had speaking into your mic. We're going to get complaints.
Shall I say? Can I just say that I know very little about the task and finish group, and so I'd like to take it offline so I can actually become acquainted with what's been happening and what the conclusions are, and then I will take it back to the cabinet, to the group.
That's much appreciated, Val. Thank you so much. Do we have any more questions for Donna and Rachel? No? In that case, the recommendations that we're being asked to vote on are that the ONS committee note the broad direction of travel for the local plan review, pending formal laying and enactment of the relevant legislation and regulation, and provide any commentary as required. Now, I think we'll come to the commentary as part of the debate, but could I have a proposer and seconder for that?
My job this evening.
Thanks.
Yeah,
And
happy to propose.
thank you, councillors Claydon and Billing. So to the debate, which I think we could use as our opportunity to say what the commentary we are providing is. Councillor Munster, would you like to kick us off?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a really important piece of work. It is going to shape the future of our district, regardless of what happens with respect to local government or reorganisation and the administrations and institutions which govern the area of North Herts. But I think it's also important that we engage and involve the public as soon as possible, because we know how sensitive development and development proposals are to communities right across the district, and it is only right that we involve them at the earliest opportunity to make sure that they are aware of the process, they are aware of what's coming down the line. So if we can ensure that we're engaging with the public, we're engaging with those strategic stakeholders, parish councils, etc., that is undoubtedly going to enable us to hopefully get better outcomes for our communities. But as Councillor Wright has already pointed out, this is a ever evolving sector, the planning sector. We of course await with bated breath for the government's planning reforms, which could potentially have quite significant impacts for us in North Herts. But very happy with the train of thought and trying to secure those additional protections for our district come LGR.
Thank you. So yes, absolutely, I completely concur. We're very much looking forward to that wider engagement and consultation piece. And I guess we'd urge that, even though we appreciate it is a tight schedule, we'd urge you not to skimp on that bit. We're also very much looking forward to the opportunity to see you again here at this committee in due course. Is there anything else that anyone else would like to add to that debate? No? Go on. Oh, you're poised to vote. Okay, well, let's move to the vote then. Thank you so much.
That motion is carried, Chair.
Super. Many thanks. Thank you both very much for joining us today. Our final item for the evening is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. And I'm going to ask James to present for us.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Unfortunately, Jeevan's off sick today, so it's her report, but I'll just provide a brief update on a few bits. Coming to Appendix C to the report, which is the decisions and monitoring tracker from the last meeting in January. The Council Delivery Plan Q2 update recommendations were approved at Cabinet as per the referral, and the Council Tax Reduction Scheme and the effectiveness of that. The recommendations again were considered and approved as per the referral to Cabinet, which then went to Council last week for member consideration and was approved. Looking at the work programme attached at Appendix A to the report, there is the digital transformation which was scheduled for today's meeting. Unfortunately, due to a miscommunication with officers, that report is instead going to come to the March meeting, and there'll be a report ready for that. And then, yeah, looking at the March meeting, you currently have the digital transformation, the RIPA annual update, the Council Delivery Plan Q3 update, and Councillor Muntz's task and finish group report that will be presented to this committee. If members have any other suggestions of topics for this meeting, that would be appreciated. Either of you have them tonight, or if you can let the scrutiny officer know ideally by Friday the 13th of February, so that we can get reports written. The most recent forward plan publication from the 16th of January is included as Appendix B to the report, though I would just flag that is the published version. If you look on the website, the dates are updated, and then you'll see more reflective dates on there as we become aware of any delays to items. As always, if members have any specific questions they want addressing either as part of the report or that they might have following reading the report from officers, please do provide them in advance to the scrutiny officer. Just means that we can get officers and executive members briefed and ready to provide an answer on that specific point. Scrutiny training. So Jeevan will be delivering a scrutiny session as part of our induction, member development week in May, as we don't have an induction. And that will be Tuesday, the 12th of May, and that will be from 7 p.m. in person, and will include time to develop and draft the work programme for the 26-27 civic year, as we did this year. And just finally touching on the report itself, there is an additional recommendation, Chair, just that the committee note the decisions and monitoring tracker as attached at Appendix C to the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Butworth.
Thank you. Just a quick question on the items deferred / to be rescheduled, to understand where those items actually are in the pipeline, and just to say that I know that health equality is an area that several councillors have raised. I think Councillor Strong raised it at the last full council as well. So it'd be interesting to hear what's going on in that arena. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So myself, Jeevan, Chair and Vice Chair have a meeting on Thursday to discuss that sort of March meeting, at which point we sort of bring in those topics to be scheduled or deferred, and consider whether that will be for March. So yeah, certainly if the Chair and Vice Chair are wanting to bring that within that. The annual safeguarding review, just to flag, we circulated an update to members on that recently, possibly last week, end of last week, that just said they're sort of changing the report on that one. So that will be brought as soon as possible with a more detailed breakdown for members' consideration. And yeah, the other topics are just there from where we receive suggestions from members.
Councillor Mansell.
Thank you. I'm very happy that the Task and Finish Group is on track to present its final report to this committee next month. I'm going to be working very closely with Jeevan to make sure that we complete and formalise those recommendations, of which have been made by colleagues. And I'm trying to recall here, the Developer Contributions SPD, has that been before this committee previously? Just looking at page 4 of the key decisions, and if not, it may be a good idea, because of course, as we know through the 106 Task and Finish, it is an area of which communities are intensely aware of, and it's important that that has additional scrutiny. So that might be something to look into in greater detail at the next meeting prior to the decision being taken on the 14th of April.
Yeah, I mean, just to comment on that one. I think the draft Developer Contributions SPD came through the committee from memory. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, absolutely, we can look at scheduling that for March's meeting.
Thank you. Any other comments or things you would like to see brought forward? So you're going to leave it up to the 4 of us. Councillor Ward?
Yeah, well, it's actually just a more general comment. I just wanted to say, probably, no, well, yourselves and Councillor Bryant in particular, just thank you for tonight, because I think the executive members have given us very thorough and detailed information, which has been highly useful, not just from the officers. Thank you.
Yeah, delighted to agree with you on that one, Paul. I think they've been really very informative presentations today. So if there's no further questions for James, we can move to the recommendations. So those are that the committee prioritises topics for inclusion in the work programme attached as Appendix A, and where appropriate determines the high-level form and timing of scrutiny input. So thank you for your thoughts on that, and we'll take that away and put that together on Thursday. 2.2, that we've considered the most recent iteration of the forward plan, and we suggested a list of items to be considered at its meetings in the coming civic year. And the additional recommendation that the committee note the decisions and monitoring tracker attached as Appendix C to the report, which is additional there. So could I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Billing, and a seconder, Councillor Munster. Delighted there. So to the debate, is there anything in that list that that anyone additionally wants to bring forward, thinks is very important? Again, you have the opportunity to send us an email or come and have a chat later if you would like to add anything more. If not, then we can move to the vote. Thank you.
Yep, that motion is also carried, Chair. Thank you.
Many thanks. Thank you, everybody, for this evening. Our next meeting is Tuesday, 24th of March. Good night.